As a 21st century manufacturer, you're contending with the most powerful transformative forces in history. Digitization, globalization, servitization, and more are redefining what products can be, powered by the most potent force of all, the Internet of Things. And as this tidal wave of change gains momentum, companies like yours will need to find new paths to competitive advantage. As you seek those paths, you'll face an array of new, business-critical, and fundamentally strategic questions about your products, your partners, your supply chain, about the very nature of your business model. But it's decisions about your technology infrastructure that can make or break the strategy you define. What hardware, what software, what design and engineering expertise will enable you to act most forcefully and effectively on your best IoT opportunities? You need to decide, how will you set yourself up to win on a playing field where the rules are still being written? That playing field is the Internet of Things, and starting today, we'll write those rules together. We'll explore the technologies that enable connection between your products and the systems they're part of, between your things and the Internet. These are the bridges between the physical and digital worlds, between where you are today and where you and your company can go in the era of the Internet of Things. Please welcome to the stage PTC's President and Chief Executive Officer, Jim Heppelmann.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. I hope you feel like me, with a double shot of coffee and rock and roll. I'm ready to go. So welcome to PTC Live Global 2015. We at PTC are very excited to host this event, and over the next couple days get a good chance to dialogue with many of you and talk about all the great things that are happening in the PTC ecosystem and with our customers. Now, we're all here for one reason, really, which is things. Some of us engineer them, some of us manufacture them, some of us are involved in servicing them, and some of us are starting to get involved in connecting them to the Internet. And that brings us to the Internet of Things, which of course is a subject that's full of buzz and full of hype, but it's full of value too. There's going to be a lot of value created here. The Internet of Things is a natural fit for PTC because, after all, we've been in the thing business for 30 years now. Things are our heritage, and creating and servicing them has really been the core of our business for a very long time. Now, all things, at least things that come out of a factory, that were manufactured, start as 3D digital things. We, PTC, pioneered the idea of 3D modeling 30 years ago. It's a fantastic way to describe and to document and to test and to validate your ideas. And we've made CAD ubiquitous, such that practically everything you see around you that came from a factory was modeled this way. It's a really great way to validate complex ideas, to build these digital prototypes that give you a high degree of confidence that this design is going to work. And then when you're ready, you take that digital prototype and you give it to the factory. Now this digital information, the 3D models and the PLM information, it's filled with valuable descriptive information about the form and the fit and the function of the thing, but also how to manufacture it, the whole process documentation that goes with it. So this package of digital information gets handed to the factory, and the factory goes through a process of converting it into the physical thing. In fact, if the factory were small enough and automated enough, you'd call it a 3D printer, and you'd literally hit the print button, and it would go take your digital description and make it physical. But at this point, the prototype is somewhat exhausted. It's spent. It did its job, and it's no longer that valuable to us once the physical thing is out in the world. So in most product life cycles, we go from digital to physical, and nobody ever looks back. So if you're sitting back saying, I wonder how my product's doing out there in the hands of the customer, you just hear crickets. Nobody really knows what's going on. It's just silence until the phone rings, and then there's a customer calling the hotline or calling you up, and there's a problem, and maybe they're already angry, and so forth. So information about physical things rarely makes it back to the digital world where the whole story started. We don't have a closed loop. In fact, these digital and physical worlds are very distinct, and they're very separate. This has been our reality. It's been this way for decades. And most of today's software products, and especially enterprise-oriented software products, are sort of built on this fundamental understanding that there's no feedback loop. That you'll put things out there and hope for the best, and maybe occasionally through a customer you'll get some feedback, and usually by that point it's a little late, and like I said, they're already angry. So many of our systems are very much handicapped by this silence. But I would submit that things literally are changing, that we're entering into a new world where simple, mechanical, standalone things have become smart. Maybe we put software in the engine control unit, or we put software in the digital cockpit display. And once these things are smart, we realized they could become connected. And we could use our computer or our smartphone or our tablet to do remote monitoring and control of that thing. And then we took this idea to another level. Maybe families of things could share common elements. For example, share a database in the sky. If you think about the way the Apple products, the iPad and the iPod and the iPhone and the iMac and you name it, all share a common cloud. iCloud and iTunes and the App Store. I mean, that's what's happening with all kinds of product families, where they now work together in fundamentally new ways because they're actually sharing common digital componentry. And if you take that idea to the next level, you get smart cities and smart farms and smart infrastructures, where whole systems of systems collaborate together to make the world a safer and more efficient and more economical type of place to live. This concept is like a slippery slope we're all sliding down. It's happening everywhere and all the time, and I would argue all around us. So the consequence here is that if you're involved in creating things, the very DNA of these things is changing. There's now a whole stack of technology required, particularly the middle part of this diagram. And we still have the physical parts, the hardware and the software that's out in the field with the customer, but now we also have the cloud parts, the database and the application platforms and the analytics and the new applications and security and integration. This is the kind of products we're making today. They're part physical and part digital at the same time. They're part client and part server. They're part on-premise and they're part in the cloud. And the portion that you can print on a 3D printer is actually decreasing every day because so much of this isn't physical anymore. It's now digital product content. I believe that virtually every type of thing will end up this way, from medical devices and diagnostics equipment to refrigerators to planes, trains, and automobiles. It's all headed this way. So I would argue that this is the new reality of things. There's no longer a clean separation between that digital world and that physical world on the other side. What we're now talking about is the yin and the yang of a world where digital and physical are distinct, but they're inseparable and they're working together. Now, as the head of PTC, I would tell you that we, PTC, can't claim to be your partner helping you create and service things if we ourselves don't realize that these things are fundamentally changing. We have to make this yin and yang of the new reality a PTC reality, and that's what we've set out to do. This has really been my mission over the last few years, and I think we're making great progress. If you look in just the last 18 months, PTC has invested more than $500 million in acquisitions and in organic investment within the company. We've acquired not just one or two, but 3 of the hottest startup companies in these fields to bring together this incredible set of technology and possibilities, starting with ThingWorx, which is the best tool, bar none, for developing applications that power this new reality in the Internet of Things world. We acquired Exida, which was the largest and most successful provider of connectivity of things from the edge up to the cloud. And then last month, we announced a very interesting acquisition of a company called ColdLight, which does automated predictive analytics by listening to the data streams of things and telling you what that product's really telling you and what you ought to go do about it. So it's an incredible influx of new technology and new ideas into PTC. And as a consequence, when you take this influx of new ideas and the proud heritage of 30 years of helping companies create and service things, you really create, for the first time ever, an entire stack of technology to implement this new reality, this digital physical convergence. So starting at the bottom, the idea of Creo for modeling the physical parts, and Integrity for managing the software that's in the product, and Windchill for understanding how all that stuff fits together in many different configurations and how that changes over time. And then Exida for connecting up to the cloud, ThingWorx for building and running application, and ColdLight for introducing analytics into this world. And then Exida and ThingWorx providing connectivity and security to all the world around it. It's a tremendous amount of technology. Now, if you look at this stack, you might argue that maybe there's a few more brands that are really helpful. So we have a strategy here to do some brand consolidation. We are going to market now with a single unified brand for this cloud technology called ThingWorx that brings in the best of Exida and the new ColdLight technology into a single family of new reality capabilities that we call ThingWorx. Now, given this new reality platform, we're rethinking a little bit, what does this mean for CAD and for PLM? You're going to hear a lot about that here at PTC Live 2015. But keep in mind that CAD and PLM were never conceived of the idea, really, of feedback loops, where all of the products you create have a voice. And after you send them out in the world, they connect back to you and tell you what's going on. What are they doing? What's the environment? What's the use? How are they performing? How good is your design? How effective is your service? They're capable of telling you that, and it's really going to change the way your business runs. And it's going to change the way you think about how information systems, whether they're CAD and PLM or ALM and SLM, or whether they're ERP and CRM and supply chain management, you're going to rethink the way these things work. And you're going to say, we shouldn't run systems anymore that ignore the voice of the product. That there really is a tremendous new opportunity to rethink everything, basically. So there's a lot of ideas here, and some of it, when I'm talking about technology stacks and so forth, might get a little abstract. You might say I kind of follow it, but I'm not 100% sure. So we want to try to make it more real. We want to give you a demonstration of this technology and these ideas using a simple product of a type that everybody's familiar with, but one that you never thought of being connected to the internet. Probably can't even imagine why. It's a mountain bike. So let's go ahead and take a look. So you might see I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues here. Mike Campbell, who heads up our CAD business unit at PTC, and Don Breda, who's one of the Creo product managers. So, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about the bike?
Sure. So this is the Santa Cruz V10 downhill racer. It's the first all-carbon bike frame to win the World Cup. It did so in 2010. And since then, Santa Cruz have won many world championships with this bike. As you can see on the monitors, this bike is completely modeled in PTC Creo. We're very proud to have Santa Cruz as one of our many great customers. And they use PTC Creo and other PTC products to get complete confidence in the design. So they use it for the design and the concepting, as well as the simulation, and prepare the model before they hand it off to manufacturing.
Now, Mike, when I look at this bike physically and I look at the CAD model, I see a couple of differences. Can you kind of tell us what's going on there?
Sure. So the bike has been made smart and connected. So like many of your products, the bike was a mechanical product, as you might expect. But by spending about $150 on a collection of hardware like this, we outfitted it with a battery pack and a Raspberry Pi for connectivity, and then a collection of sensors that we retrofit on the bike to measure and monitor some of the key characteristics. For example, we're tracking the wheel speed of each of the wheels. We're tracking the rider's pedal cadence. We're tracking the compression of the suspension, as well as the angle of the steering wheel.
Okay, so that's very interesting, because we took a physical bike, and with after-the-fact sensing capabilities and connectivity, we've now connected it up to the cloud using an IoT platform. We've now created a bike that's part physical, part digital, and now we're capable, using web or mobile technologies, we're capable of looking at dashboards that tell us what's going on with that bike from, literally thousands of miles away if we care to. So as Don interacts with the bike, you'll see, for example, the indicator on the steering, the handlebars angle is changing. And if he gives the wheel a spin, we can see that the RPM indicator on the back wheel starts up as well. So this idea of a feedback loop that tells you what's going on with your design after you put your design in the market is a pretty big idea. And you can probably extrapolate from this simple example many different things that you could do in your world and with your products. Now, this dashboard's a powerful idea. It tells us on a web page what's going on, what all the sensor readings are. But Don, if you give the back wheel a spin again, you'll notice that we have a skid slip indicator here, that little yellow diamond that comes up. That's actually not just a sensor reading, but it's the first of a category of capabilities we would call analytics. And this is a simple analytic. We say, hey, if the back wheel is spinning at a different velocity than the front wheel, then we must be in a slip or a skid, because how else would you explain that? I suppose the other answer is he's lifting the bike up, but you get the point. So anyway, this ability to understand not just what the sensor readings are, but to analyze those sensor readings and really understand what's going on is a powerful idea. Now, while these dashboards are really interesting, you can also see that they don't really tell you the full story. If Don's riding that bike, the dashboard remains static, and the readings change on the dashboard, but you don't really know fully what's going on with that bike if you're 1,000 miles away. So we want to introduce to you today a pretty interesting new idea that we're bringing to market that would better map what's going on in the physical world back to the digital world. And it's a big idea that involves CAD and PLM. So Mike, why don't you talk about that idea?
So the idea, Jim, is the concept of a digital twin. And the digital twin is an exact representation of this unique occurrence of the bike. So what you see up here on the screen is the digital twin. It's a representation that is showing as Don moves the bike, as he rides the bike, the sensors are reporting back and representing, providing great context for us to better understand exactly what's happening with the bike. Now, this is not just a representation. You'll notice that there are reaction forces that are being displayed. Those reaction forces are not measured on the bike. We're measuring, for example, the front fork displacement, and then we're using Creo Simulate specifically, in another form of analytics to provide deeper insight into what's actually happening on the bike. So you can imagine that this provides some great context for engineers. And it does so in the language that they're familiar with. It does so in the language of CAD. Now, many of you in the audience are Creo users. And we have a concept in Creo that you're familiar with probably called a trail file. Trail file basically records everything that happens in a session. And later on, if you take that trail file, you can run it against a Creo session, and it will basically replicate what's happening. That's sort of the concept that you're seeing here. We're able to capture a trail file of how the product is being used and then replay that scenario against our design or future iterations of that design to help us get greater confidence in it. Now, so far, what we've been talking about is moving information from the physical world into the digital world. And there's a lot of value in doing that. But sometimes I'm actually in the physical world. So how might I use this concept if I actually have to be next to the product, if I have to service the product, for example? And that takes us to our last concept here, the idea of augmented reality.
So I'll narrate what's going on here. So Mike is just picking up an iPad, and just for safety's sakes, we're using a hard cable as opposed to AirPlay. But Mike's going to lock in on the bike and scan its serial number so that we know not only what model of bike, but which exact instance within that bike family are we talking about so we can establish connection. Now Mike is backing up, and what you're seeing here is the video feed that Mike sees on his iPad. And you can see that we have augmented onto this bicycle a dashboard. So we now have digital gauges showing on the physical bike that show the RPMs of the back wheel and the front wheel and the pedals and the angle of the steering and the suspension. And you also see those interesting little green arrows. Those are actually the Creo reaction forces being augmented back onto the bicycle in real time. And you see as well the yellow diamond, if you give the wheel a spin one more time, that tells us we're in that slip-skid condition, slippery road type of problem. You ought to be aware of that as well. So this is a really big, powerful idea that we're very, very excited about. And at the core of this is a complete digital understanding of the product that you can only get from PLM and CAD technologies, like, of course, our Windchill and Creo products. So I really love that stuff, and that'll conclude our demo. Thanks a lot, guys. Join me in giving Mike and Don a hand. Thanks also to Santa Cruz. It's a great bicycle, and we appreciate the fact that they gave us the CAD data and the bike, actual bicycle and so forth. So you'll be able to see this and interact with it in the booth at the PTC Pavilion throughout the course of the show. So be sure to stop by and take a look for yourself what's going on. Now, this is an interesting idea for bicycles, but we're really talking about a bigger play here. The bike is just a simple example. You can extrapolate to thousands of real-world examples, like projecting a operation and service UI onto this Generac generator that sits out front of or out behind the headquarters building at PTC. If service is the killer app for IoT, then augmented reality and digital twin and Internet of Things is the killer technology for service. It's really a big and exciting idea. And we'll be able to reinvent service not just by having a dashboard, but actually by augmenting procedures. So for example, with this Bobcat, let's say there's an issue with the hydraulic system. So I turn on my X-ray vision, and it says, hey, Jim, come right over here, loosen this little gold-colored nut up, slide this part out of the way, remove the clip, now come back, get this pink nut, loosen that up, guide that part out of the way, and here you are, you know, ready to do the next part of the procedure. So, you know, with Creo Illustrate, for example, we have a tremendous capability to take your CAD data and do this quickly. It's kind of a way to create documentation, except it's much faster and much more efficient for everybody. It's much faster to create this animation by using CAD data than it is to try to describe this process in written prose. Trust me. It also doesn't need to be translated to 35 languages because graphics is a universal language. And then finally, the human brain has the ability to absorb this kind of information literally 1,000 times faster than it does to read and comprehend text. So it's a big win-win-win for the author, for the operator, for the service technician, and basically everybody else. Now, we showed you a lot of stuff, and we showed you it quickly, so let me recap a little bit and explain what we threw at you. Okay, we started with the old reality, a CAD model that begot a bicycle. And at that point, they were seemingly disconnected, as they always have been, on a go-forward basis. They were separate and distinct. But then we took off-the-shelf technology, things that I'm pretty sure Mike and team got off Amazon.com, and we took a Raspberry Pi, which is a $35 little computer that can take sensor readings and spool them up over a Wi-Fi connection. And we plugged some sensors in that we purchased off the shelf. By the way, this is a big idea you can all do with your products. You don't have to wait for the next generation of your products to come out and already be smart and connected. You can go back and connect the last generation, see what you learn about the design, and then try to figure out what's the best new design inclusive of built-in connectivity and sensing capabilities. So anyway, we took this sensors and Raspberry Pi and connected via ThingWorx up to the cloud so that we could build dashboards and watch sensor data flowing in. We then did some rudimentary analytics, for example, that skid slip indicator, where we said if these two values aren't the same, then we must be in a slip condition. That would be our conclusion. But that was simple, it's obvious, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg. What would be much more interesting and much more valuable is if we could do analytics across all the sensors from all the bicycles of this model, plus all the bicycles of all the other models on all the race courses and all the, the city courses and so forth, all at the same time. How could we process all of that data using big data analytics techniques and find out what is it really telling us? That's why a month ago, we announced the acquisition of this company called ColdLight, which has some pretty amazing technology for doing just that. So it reads in all the data coming from sensors, so-called big data, because there can be many, many gigabytes, terabytes, even petabytes of data streaming in from products. It automatically looks through that data for patterns that would, in the past, prove to have correlated to certain events. And then once it understands patterns and correlations, it switches from looking backward and it starts looking forward. And it listens to the real-time incoming streams, and it begins to see when these patterns develop. Now, a lot of times these patterns that precede a product failure take weeks to develop. So even when we're just days into a pattern that is weeks long, we can say, hey, we're headed down that path again of this type of failure. You should dispatch the technicians. You should get out there and try to intervene and prevent this failure. And if you have to take the product down, do that when it's not being used at a convenient time. Let's not wait for it to blow up in the middle of heavy production use and everybody has to stop while we go solve the crisis of what the problem is. So ColdLight's really big breakthrough here is to automate this process. And there'll be a booth for ColdLight here at the show. I recommend you go talk to the team and the founder, Ryan Kaplan, because they have done a fantastic job in automating the ingestion of IoT data, the automatic recognition of patterns, and then the ability to generate predictive models so that you get the sausage without having to figure out all of the sausage-making process that the data scientists require to happen, in order to get there. So it's going to be a huge value for your company. Then we took this data and we fed it into the so-called digital twin. And again, the idea of the digital twin is it's really the avatar. And the reason we call it a twin is because every time a physical instance is born, that is to say, leaves the factory, then the digital instance is born as well. And if we make 1,000 physical bicycles, we would maintain 1,000 digital twin counterparts. So now everything that's experienced by the physical product, by that bicycle, for example, can be captured and replayed and processed against its digital counterpart. You might call what we were doing here simulation, because we were feeding in data and using kinematics, dynamic simulation from Creo. I'd actually call it enlightenment, because actually we weren't simulating anything. We were only enlightening ourselves about what's actually happening. So it's a really big, powerful idea to have this digital twin that helps us really understand how our designs are performing, how our products are being used, what problems are developing, and so forth. We then took this enlightened understanding back into the field with us using augmented reality and projected it back onto the product. We could have just used CAD data if we were 1,000 miles away, but actually if we're in front of the product, I don't want to look at CAD data, I want to look at the bicycle. And so we augmented onto the bicycle using an iPad. Could have been an iPhone or an Android device or smart glasses or HoloLens, whatever you want to use. We augmented sensor readings and dashboards. We augmented analytics around the skid slip indicator. We augmented Creo real-time CAD in the loop analytics around the reaction stresses, and then projected that onto the product right in front of us. So it was very exciting stuff. This is really, a promising new world, and it makes us think about how would we change lots of software products that were built before an understanding of this world, really developed. And so we start with the idea that sharing thing data with business applications, ERP, CRM, etc., is a big idea. It's something we really ought to do. We, PTC, are using this notion to reconsider, if you will, CAD and PLM and ALM and SLM, because we think it really has big implications for all of them. But we also want to help other companies do it, because most of our peers in the application world don't have the kind of technology I just showed you around ThingWorx and ColdLight and Exida and so forth. So what we've announced is a new offering called Converge, ThingWorx Converge. Converge is a data hub where the systems of yesterday converge with the new reality of tomorrow, and we can integrate these systems together. So Converge is how we're integrating Creo and Windchill and Integrity and Servigistics type of applications into the world of IoT. But we're also opening it up to other systems, to other partners, to the incumbent systems you have in your environment, the homegrown systems, you name it. And one of the companies that was first to see the power of this idea was a company called ServiceMax. Now, if you know ServiceMax, they're a big-time leader in the field of field service automation. They're really good at helping you understand when you go out in the field to service something, how to do that efficiently. But you could do it a lot more efficiently if you actually were listening to the voice of the thing you're about to dispatch a truck to go service. In fact, maybe you wouldn't even dispatch the truck. But if you did, you'd dispatch it at exactly the right time, and it would already have exactly the right parts on board, because it's on a mission to fix a known problem from a known thing. So ServiceMax sees a big benefit in leveraging this new reality that PTC's created, and of course, we PTC see a big benefit in complementing our IoT and SLM technologies with the ServiceMax capabilities. So about a month ago, we announced a partnership whereby PTC and ServiceMax are going to develop together, and we're going to sell together an integrated offering that goes all the way from the product all the way through the complete service experience. ServiceMax is also here at the show, and I recommend that you stop by their booth and get a demonstration of what we're talking about, because this ability to give field technicians access to contextual and real-time product information, including service procedures, is a big idea that's going to create a lot of value. So what does this all mean for PTC? Well, essentially, things are changing fast within PTC, and we are evolving to meet the needs of our customers. In some ways, we're evolving because you're evolving, and we want to remain an important and topical partner as you think about what's most strategic, most important to what you're trying to accomplish. So we've been building a new suite if you will, of horizontal technology platforms, all of which will, at this point in time, bear the brand name of ThingWorx. So ThingWorx for application development and connectivity, ThingWorx for analytics, ThingWorx for capabilities for digital twin and augmented reality. A tremendous platform that's very horizontal, and it could be used in many industries for many reasons. But we, PTC, are committed to bring it back into our world, the world of companies who create and service things, and reinvent how you would create, connect, operate, analyze, and service the products that you bring to market every day. This really is the new reality that we're off to pursue. So we think this new reality is here to stay. You have a very important role in creating this new reality. So we encourage you to open up your minds, to think big, to jump into the game, to challenge the status quo in your company, to innovate. And you can know that we'll be right there beside you, offering up good ideas and good technologies and good references and good capabilities, because together we can make things happen. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a great show here at PTC Live 2015. Thank you.